Hello and welcome to the Intentional Brief, your weekly video update on the one big thing in cybersecurity news for middle market companies, their investors, and executive teams. I'm your host, Shay Colson, managing partner at Intentional Cybersecurity, and you can find us online at intentionalcyber.com. Today is Tuesday, January 20th, 2026, and the news in the past week is reinforcing what many of us already suspected, but now we have numbers to back it up. Breaches are up, attackers are getting smarter, and both nation states and ransomware gangs are continuing to come after the soft targets in the marketplace because they're the ones that are vulnerable. So let's start a little bit with the numbers here. According to a report released last week by Comparatech, doing a year-end global ransomware review, they rose 32% in 2025 with 7,419 attacks compared to 5,631 the year before. Again, these are just the ones that we're able to see visibly. Likely there are even more. They note that manufacturing was the hardest hit sector, with attacks there up 56% and ransom demands doubling to an average of 1.16 million. Unsurprisingly, the U.S. remains the top target with 3,810, nearly half of those global attacks targeted here in the US. And there's some other news that came out this week that notes it's not just ransomware gangs who are getting more active. The threat team at Cisco Talos released research this week on a Chinese APT that they're calling UAT 8837, a name that means nothing to anybody that I wish we would stop using, but they note that it has been systematically breaching North American critical infrastructure organizations over the past year using two things. One, compromised credentials. Two, unpatched servers. So this is the thing that I think we need to be triangulating and tracking, is that both nation-state actors and ransomware crews are using the same playbook. They're compromising identities, they're using those to access unpatched system, using those credentials to move laterally around the environment, and then dropping their payload and executing, whether it's compromise for the nation states or exfiltration and ransom for the ransomware gangs, neither of which are good. And they're getting better at it. Researchers from Group IB posted a new report this week about something that they call the Deadlock ransomware group, who is using a blockchain smart contract to store their command and control infrastructure. So this is the way by which the malicious software on your endpoint, command and control, sends information back, receives commands from the threat actors. So instead of using servers that are centralized and can be taken down, these threat actors are storing these proxy addresses on blockchains, which are distributed across the blockchain nodes worldwide under the Polygon blockchain, making no central server to seize, making enforcement very difficult, and then making it cheap, decentralized, and nearly impossible to disrupt for them from an operational perspective. And as we know, other attackers will quickly adopt this approach because it is effective, making it both proliferate and then even harder to defend against. We're also seeing reports last week of other clever techniques in the wild, with a new malware loader called Castle Loader, which is targeting government agencies and critical infrastructure as well, and it uses memory-based execution to evade file-based traditional detections. It deploys through social engineering, including on platforms like LinkedIn, and its primary job is to steal credentials, which again feeds us back into the top of this funnel in terms of how both ransomware gangs and nation states are gaining access. So what does this mean for you? I think, as always, the takeaway is clear. The fundamentals still matter, but what's happening is the margin for error, our risk, our ability to ride this risk out without impact, is shrinking. Compromised credentials remain a major challenge in terms of both entry points and protection. So this means that you need MFA everywhere, not just on the VPN, but for all your admin accounts, for all your cloud services, for all your privileged access. It means that we need to review these access rights, make sure they're still needed, and if they're not needed, then they need to be deleted. The other piece is we can't be running unpatched systems that are still vulnerable to exploitation. We see CISA adding 0 days to their catalog on a regular basis, and if you are not able to keep up with those patches, you need to get better. That patch management capability, especially for internet-facing systems, is no longer optional. And even for internal systems, this old school kind of M&M model where it's hard candy shell, soft and squishy on the inside, once that identity is compromised, then that candy shell, that hard exterior, is compromised, and the soft squishy middle is what lets them run rampant. So we have to keep in mind that these basics are what keep us from the evolving clever techniques. Attackers are going to continue to innovate. They're going to continue to do new things to achieve what they're looking at. Your goal is not to defend against the latest, greatest attack, although you may need your tools to evolve if you're not able to keep up with today's attacks, but instead focus on controlling those things, whether you're defending less attack surface, like we talked about last week, securing your identities, patching your systems, and then monitoring for any of those anomalous pieces of activity. I think, again, the challenge of this is not that we have nation states and ransomware gangs that can't be beat. We saw Microsoft notch a win for the good guys last week by taking down the Red VDS cybercrime virtual desktop service. But what we do know is that more bad guys will come in and fill that space, and the techniques that attackers use that work will proliferate against them. Our job is to run with a disciplined approach where we're managing hygiene, identity, patch management, detection capabilities that actually work, and putting them in play around the environments that we need to protect, and doing that consistently so that we understand our own environment and then can manage for these externalities. It is hard out there, I get it, but this is the game, and if we're not doing it, we're going to lose it. From a fundraising perspective, another big week with more than $30 billion in newly committed capital, and that's not counting the news that PE giant Clayton, Dubilier, and Rice are seeking $26 billion for their next flagship fund. But what we did see is Collar Capital raising $17 billion for their ninth flagship PE secondaries fund. Sixth Street raising 3.75 billion euros for their third European direct lending fund. HIG Capital putting up 1.6 billion for their fourth European mid-market fund, and New Mountain Capital raising 1.2 billion for their second non-control PE fund. The public markets, despite kind of the macro environment's inputs last week, seem to be continuing on with all three, the Dow, the S&P, and the Nasdaq, essentially flat last week, despite quite a rocky political week here in the US. And so whether that trend continues is anybody's guess, but I do think we'll see at least a few big bets being made out of these new funds, especially if CDR lands their $26 billion to put into play. These are big dollars and they need to go somewhere to get put to work. A reminder that you can find links to all the articles we covered in the comments section below. You can find back issues and written transcripts of these videos at intentionalcyber.com. And you can sign up there for our monthly newsletter in the Intentional Dispatch at intentionalcyber.com/newsletter. And we will see you next week for another edition of the Intentional Brief.